This program contains coarse language.
There's been another horrific truck accident.
The officer said to me, we have some bad news. I'm afraid your husband had died in a road accident.
It's a story that's all too common. Big trucks and tragedy. Are truck drivers simply under too much pressure?
The link between payments for wages and road safety is undeniable to me.
I was sacked because I put it in writing that the trucks were breaking the law.
Welcome to Four Corners and our first program for 2014. Back at work after the summer holidays, there'll be many people with a tale to tell of an episode on the roads with the truck driver who seemed to be in a hurry, the tailgating and so on. I'm equally sure there'll be drivers of long-haul trucks with stories of their own. But behind all the anecdotes, the statistics are undeniable. While the most recent official figures show that the national road toll for all accidents is at its lowest on record, the fact remains that every year for the decade to 2012, more than 200 road deaths have involved big trucks. And it's not at all unusual for authorities to blame driver fatigue or mechanical failure in the truck. Drug abuse is also significant. As we'll show tonight, some big trucking companies have an appalling safety record. And while industry representatives say there's no relationship between accidents and the financial pressures on drivers to meet tough schedules, there's also a strong view within the industry that the link is undeniable. To test the claims close up, reporter Stephen Long took to the highways, north, south and west. The picture he presents is chilling.
It's 4 a.m. and Brian Turpey's starting a long day on the road. There's been many a day when he's seen dawn from behind the wheel.
Well, my dad was an interstate truck driver, and from the time I was a young boy, that's all I ever wanted to do was drive trucks. I've been an interstate truck driver for 40 years.
It's the lead up to Christmas and business is booming, but it's a perilous time for truckies.
It hasn't been a good week at all now. We've had, I think, 5 or 6 fatalities this week.
5 or 6 truck drivers dying.
Yeah.
To be precise, 5 truck drivers killed in 9 days. What do you think's driving all that?
Well, one of the greatest problems the road transport industry has always faced is unregulated and unabated competition. And it forces freight rates down to unrealistic levels, and that in turn has a domino effect that forces the driver's wages down, makes him work harder and longer to try and make his wages. It makes the transport companies try to run the trucks longer and harder to try and at least break even, because at the moment I can't see anyone that's making money out of trucks.
Brian Turpey is an owner-driver. Like most truckies, he only gets paid when the wheels are turning.
With a long-distance driver, they only get paid for the kilometres they drive. They don't get paid anything else for washing the truck or loading it or unloading it. They just get paid for the kilometres they drive. As the decades have flown by, our wages haven't kept pace with inflation and the rest of the community, and now we're in a situation where in order to keep up we have to work longer and harder, and you know, the outcome of that is seen every night on the 6 o'clock news.
One man is dead and 14 people have been injured in a crash involving a truck and 4 cars on the Hume Highway near Campbelltown.
The truck driver is often not at fault, but fatigue and speeding by truckies is a serious problem.
There's been another horrific truck accident, this time involving 3 trucks in Victoria. 2 of the drivers were killed in the fiery collision, and police are investigating whether fatigue was to blame.
In this fiercely competitive industry, commercial pressures can collide with safety, as the aftermath of this horrific accident revealed.
It's a scene of chaos and carnage in Monavale on Sydney's northern beaches tonight.
A runaway Cootes petrol tanker caused this crash at Monavale in Sydney last October. It melted the roadway and claimed 2 lives.
Burning petrol was flowing down the road, could have set fire to buildings, other cars.
The exact cause of the accident isn't clear.
But we are actually pointed to mechanical failure on behalf of the truck or mistake made by the truck driver.
But a blitz on Cootes Transport after the crash revealed a litany of failures. In the space of a week, more than 200 defect notices were slapped on Cootes vehicles, nearly half for major defects such as brake failures and faults in steering or suspension. In industry terms, the level of defects in those Cootes trucks, how did it rate?
It's probably the worst I've ever seen.
Paul Endicott heads compliance operations for New South Wales Roads and Maritime Services.
Over 30% of the defects, or the major defects, related to brakes in those vehicles. It's been made quite public that we were very concerned, and insofar as the company's ability to maintain its fleet and also repair it to the requisite standard.
Cootes was a company that had a stellar reputation for safety and maintenance. What's gone wrong?
You know, with tight margins and pressures that are applied, the company's probably been worn down to the bone.
The people who do the job know that the equipment was no good. The majority of equipment wasn't any good.
In a first, this insider is speaking out about the erosion of standards at Cootes Transport in maintenance, vehicle quality and safety. He's a long-standing employee and we've concealed his identity.
I know for a fact of trucks being driven with very poor repaired jobs done on them, and they should never have been on the road. They should have been put on a tow truck, but they being continued to work. Trucks that have caught on fire. Trucks are simply well and truly over their service times. In the meantime, they just don't get looked at until they break down somewhere or something falls off. Mud guards fall off, sets of wheels fall off, brake hubs disappear, never to be seen again.
Cootes Transport is a major player in a dangerous game, hauling petroleum, gas and diesel. Not so long ago, it was one of Australia's most respected trucking firms.
It was a pin-up fleet. There's no other word to describe it.
Ian Cootes started out with 1 truck in 1965 and became a transport titan, revered and renowned for his well-presented and well-maintained fleet. He used to replace his trucks every 5 years.
Cootes the company reflected Cootes the man. What he built was a reflection of himself. He has a great love for things being tidy, in place, clean, immaculate even, in himself, in his company, in his trucks, his workshops. And the people around him seem to love working for him.
But Ian Cootes sold the company more than a decade ago. Under subsequent owners, the fleet aged. According to well-placed insiders, maintenance hours were also cut back, while Coots was owned by Champ, a private equity firm.
When you're trying to use old, dilapidated equipment, it's a lot of stress on your drivers and your workshop and things. Things get left behind, safety just goes out the window. There's a lot of close calls that we don't hear about. And I'm surprised there's not more accidents.
What went wrong, I don't know. Money, I think. Greed. Chopping things off at the bottom line. The road transport industry is an incredibly efficient beast. But they chop the margins at the top. There's nowhere else to gain profitability than from the bottom, and, it's cost cutting.
Macaleese purchased Coots from Champ in April 2012. It soon realised it would have to spend tens of millions upgrading the fleet. But in the meantime, there were contracts to be met.
Coots won the contract to cart fuel to 7-Eleven service stations to begin on the 1st of April 2013. We didn't know how they were going to do that contract on the 1st of April because they were short of vehicles, prime movers and trailers. So in desperation, they were using any equipment they could get their hands on.
Old equipment decommissioned and gathering weeds was allegedly called back into action.
I know as far as the trailer in the Motorvale accident goes, that trailer was brought out of retirement several months earlier. That was gone over to some degree, put back into service with an old prime mover to do the 7-Eleven jobs.
A number of sources claim the trailer and tanker involved in the tragedy were decades old. We've also learned crash investigators found that brake linings were worn down, overdue for replacement. The vehicle should have been taken off the road for service. Last month, the general manager of Coots spoke to staff in closed-door meetings.
He said that the information that they've been able to analyse clearly shows that there'd been serious failures in compliance, in work standards, in truck and trailer standards, repair standards. Lots of things being done that just shouldn't be done.
Macaleese wouldn't comment owing to an ongoing coronial inquiry into the Monavale deaths. Champ Private Equity said that investment in maintenance and safety had been its highest priority, and that the Coots fleet was maintained in accordance with all industry regulations and requirements. Usually it's not the transport companies and their executives feeling the heat, it's the truckies. A summer evening at the Marulan Weighbridge, just north of Goulburn in New South Wales. Truck drivers are being pulled over by police conducting random drug tests for methamphetamine and marijuana.
All right, basically, drag it down your tongue. Drag it down your tongue, as you know how to do it. Change colour when you're done properly. Tastes horrible, does it? Never does.
Word soon gets out via the truckies' CB radios.
What are they checking for in there, guys? Are they stripping trucks out, or are they just fucking roadworthy? The drug tester. The drug busters there. Have they got anything fucking better to do than harass us poor bastards? You got any drug out the fucking window?
As the blitz gets underway, trucks and cops play a game of cat and mouse.
We've just been advised by some of the drivers that a lot of them have been banked up at some of the stop areas further up the road, but we're here for about 40 hours, so we should expect some of them to have to roll.
He's right. The freight can't wait, and drivers run the gauntlet. It's not long before there's a positive test.
It would appear you've gone positive for cannabis, having a legal substance in your system.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so, well, that's exactly right. We'll find that out. So at this point in time, you are under arrest for a purpose of a secondary test, which will be conducted in the truck. I'll take these stairs for us. Straight up.
As night falls, another driver's caught.
It's given an indication of methamphetamine. No,
Okay,
well,
so
mate.
at this point in time you're under arrest
It's all right,
for
no,
the
it's
purpose
fine.
of the secondary
Yeah,
test.
it's fine.
Then another.
Now, unfortunately, you returned a positive reading for a prohibited drug being methamphetamines. Yeah? Right.
In the space of 2 hours, police test 50 truck drivers and record 3 positive drug readings. Truckers working gruelling hours use speed, as it's known, to combat fatigue, but the consequences can be lethal.
Unfortunately, with speed, there's no indicator as to when your body's going to actually shut down. So frequently we see heavy vehicle accidents where there's no braking. The person's just fallen asleep at the wheel and collided with something. Now, that could have been with a tree or a fence, or unfortunately it could be with another vehicle.
So once the effects of the methamphetamine wear off, the fatigue just hits back.
That's exactly right. Sooner or later, the body's going to tell them that it can't take any more. The body's designed to have sleep, and unfortunately they're using the methamphetamine to continue on their driving to get to the next location.
None of this surprises Jerry Brown-Saar. He's been driving trucks for 54 years, driven nearly 30 million kilometres, and there's not much he hasn't seen.
Well, I've been first on the scene 27 times. I've seen families die. I've seen families burnt. I've seen truck drivers burn and just killed. And that is what always stays with you. When you talk about road safety and transport, I can't get past seeing a truck driver burn to death.
For 30 years, Jerry Brown-Saar used uppers to stay awake while driving.
Ephedrine, methadone, dexedrine, all the old amphetamine drugs. But today's drugs, where they're taking heroin, cocaine, marijuana, ice, they worry me.
Why did you take stimulants?
Well, we couldn't do the hours. We couldn't do the hours to earn the money in those days. In the old days, we had to have assistance. On the North Queensland run, we'd do 27 hours straight. We'd run express from Townsville to Melbourne. I did that for 10 years.
So she looks in pretty good nick.
Not bad for a 10-year-old truck, done 2.5 million Ks.
Jerry Brown-Saar stopped taking stimulants in 1991. A decade later, he led a group of drivers who made candid confessions to a road safety inquiry led by Professor Michael Quinlan.
I think it was 2001, just after we started our campaign for better rates, 4 of us said, look, let's go to this Quinlan inquiry. Let's, for the first time, tell Quinlan the truth. No one's ever done it before. So we went there, and I told him, I said, we take drugs, we speed, we falsify logbooks.
We now have an opportunity.
Professor Quinlan is a leading expert on health and safety.
The problems are just going to fester and actually get worse as the amount of traffic increases on the road and the competition in the industry actually intensifies.
He led 2 inquiries which took evidence from truck drivers, transport companies and research from around the globe.
If people are not paid sufficient pay, they will try to work longer hours or speed to get more jobs in, or they use drugs. If they're paid on a contingent rate of the kilometres they drive, which most of them are, owner drivers and employees, they will drive as many hours as they can to try and meet a certain level of income that they need to meet their financial commitments. Not because they're greedy, but to survive.
A man will do whatever he has to do to put food on the table, clothes on his kids and put his kids through school, pay the rent. He'll do anything. Because the law says you can't do it, no, they'll find a way around it.
To make ends meet and get the load in on time, truckers are known to drive beyond the legal hours. But even the hours truck drivers can lawfully work are staggering. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week is the norm. If a company's qualified for basic fatigue management, truckies can drive for 14 hours. Advanced fatigue management, up to 16 hours. The WA regime is at the extreme. It allows for up to 17 hours.
I think they're crazy, and I think that, in fact, the hours should be reduced. The industry is quite insular in a way, and I think that they don't see the hours regimes as bizarre as in the way that most outsiders would view them.
Between those long days of driving, there's a so-called long break of just 7 hours.
I don't think any driver gets 7 hours sleep, but by the time you do whatever the things that you do, have a shower and tea and do all those things that are required, you might have a window of 5 hours for sleeping, but, you know, it's just, you can't survive on 5 hours or 4 hours sleep a night, 6 nights a week. It's just not humanly possible. Something's got to give, and that what gives usually is the driver.
It's 3 years to the day since an accident in Western Australia that brought home the horrible consequences of fatigue in truck driving.
That's him. That was taken in the Cape in South Africa in Struisbaai. Yeah, he loved outdoors. He was. Some days I thought he was larger than life. He couldn't die.
Suzanne de Beer migrated to Australia with her husband Albert and their 2 sons in April 2010. They settled at Bunbury, about 2 hours south of Perth.
Yeah, he was an electrical engineer, and Verve Energy offered him a job at Mooja Power Station. So, yeah, that's why we ended up coming over here.
David Tagliaferri moved to Bunbury in 2001 with his Caribbean-born wife, Listra.
His dad lived not far from us, and I just like the area. It reminded me a bit of being home, you know, very country and all that, which is nice.
The Tagliaferris and the De Beers didn't know each other. They'd never met. But on February the 3rd, 2011, both Albert De Beer and David Tagliaferri were on the highway that runs from Perth to Bunbury. David Tagliaferri was driving home from work to Bunbury in a little Hyundai Getz when he got a flat tyre. He pulled the car off the road here. Now, he couldn't pull the car all the way off the road because of the ditch, but there was a good Samaritan. Along came Albert De Beer. He was driving a big white Commodore. So he pulled the big car up behind the small car, put on the hazard lights, got out to lend a hand. Now, further along the road, there was a truck driver, Paul Kershaw. He was driving a 40-tonne vehicle. And he'd been on the road for 13 hours.
Paul Stuart Kershaw was driving a semi-trailer which slammed into 2 men changing a tyre at the side of Old Coast Road last February.
Albert De Beer died before help arrived. David Tagliaferri made it to hospital, but staff were unable to save him.
Judge Alan Fenbury said he believed Kershaw was fatigued and had probably fallen asleep seconds before hitting the men.
8 hours later, the police came knocking at the Tagliaferri's door.
I was so upset at that time, and I knew that they weren't going to tell me anything good. And the officer said to me, we have some bad news. I'm afraid your husband had died in a road accident.
The worst news you could possibly hear.
I still sometimes think it's like a dream. It's still not real sometimes to me. It's like really, really hard. He was the best father. The kids was really worried as well because even though they were in their bedroom, I don't think they were asleep. Because as soon as when the officers came in and said the kids came out crying, they knew straight away as well.
My husband was obviously at work, coming back from work, and they said the fact that he stopped to help someone wasn't part of his job description. So workman's comp didn't pay out either.
So the workers' comp wasn't covered because he'd been a good Samaritan and stopped to help someone?
Yep. Yeah. How ridiculous is that?
The truck driver, Paul Kershaw, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of dangerous driving causing death and was jailed for 5 years.
He's one of several drivers from Mears Freight Lines who've been involved in serious crashes in recent years.
Mears declined our request for an interview. Unlike the driver, it's faced no legal action.
That day in court, hearing all the detail of the case and how long the guy had been on the road, my thought was he should not have been the only one on trial. You know, the whole industry should have been on trial for what happened that day.
This is just a shocking situation. There are losers all around here, but we still have a transport company that are operating. This is my beef. 2 men have lost their lives, 1 man's in jail. There's a transport company still turning its wheels. No investigation, scot-free, got off.
Senator Glenn Stirl is enjoying a rare break at home in Perth.
And it hasn't got better.
Before entering Parliament, he spent many years as a long-haul driver.
A bit different from cooking by the side of the road.
Just a little bit, mate. I don't have to put up with the blowflies and the red dust as everyone's going past, so we've come a long way, mate.
Stirl followed in the footsteps of his father, Renzo, who migrated from Italy in 1950.
I used to drive a local truck until I joined this removal company. I was Fremantle, originally from Fremantle.
And then you were into state.
And then, yeah.
Okay.
That would have been about the same time me and Rennie were born.
Something like that.
That's when you went long distance.
That's right.
There's something in that we should know?
Yeah, well...
Okay.
Glenn, your son's got into the game as well.
Yeah, Steve. Mate's genetic. Can't help it. He's 23. He's been in the game now since he was 16. He runs road trains up to the north. Very proud of him.
Senator Stirl was a driving force in the formation of a specialist National Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal. Established in 2012, it has the power to set freight rates and address conditions that undermine safety.
Their work was to actually be able to rule and say to a group of truck drivers or owner drivers, you're not being paid a safe, sustainable rate, and they would be protected by legislation to get that rate up to where it should be.
In your view, how important was the establishment of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal?
I think it was a historic development in the industry. People have known about the pay safety connection for decades. It's not a new discovery.
But some of the most powerful players in the transport chain, including the giant retailer Coles, deny the link. They're lobbying hard to have the tribunal scrapped.
In our view, all they will do is add extra costs needlessly into Australia's supply chains. And let's not forget that all of those costs ultimately do flow through to supermarket shelves and consumers having to pay high prices.
Michael Kilgariff heads the Australian Logistics Council.
Industry self-regulation in conjunction with the national law and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, in our view, is a far more efficient but also far more effective way of driving safety through our supply chains.
From next week, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator will for the first time oversee new national laws. One rule book for trucks in all states except WA. But it can't set freight rates or deal with remuneration.
Do you accept that there's a link between remuneration and safety in trucking?
We don't accept that remuneration influences safety in the industry to the extent that has been articulated by the advocates of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal.
That's absolute rubbish. There have been numerous inquiries undertaken over the past couple of decades that show that that's not to be the case. And as a driver, I can tell you that the link between payments for wages and road safety is undeniable to me, because instead of having to work 90 hours a week to earn my wages, I should only be working 60 hours. And a driver working 1/3 less hours has got to be a safer driver.
I don't actually see them engaging with the evidence. They don't actually look at the studies. They don't question. They just ignore them. And I find it hard to deal with people who seem to ignore evidence that they don't like.
The new government is also hostile to the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal. Employment Minister Erica Betts has commissioned a review of the tribunal, but the government's already indicated it's likely to be scrapped. In April last year, Senator Abetz wrote to the mother of a truck driver who died at the wheel, saying there was no evidence that increased pay leads to a safer trucking industry.
Well, I think the parties of influence will probably have their way and the tribunal will probably go.
How would it leave you feeling?
Really pissed off. Really pissed off. I would think, you know, my husband died for what reason?
The clouds roll in over Tully in far north Queensland, the nation's wettest town and home to massive banana plantations. Produce from the north is trucked throughout Australia by Blenner's Transport. Blenner's is a major employer and a big wheel in the North Queensland economy.
It must be tough driving here in the wet.
Oh, look, the rain makes it very difficult. You know, relax for 2 seconds and you've aquaplaned and upside down in a drain.
Stephen Gleeson got a job as an operations manager with Blenner's Transport in December 2011. Within weeks, he realised there were serious problems.
The fatigue was just on an unprecedented level that I'd never seen. My belief at that time was that the supermarkets and McCain's and Nestle and them were applying pressure to Blenner's. Blenner was applying the pressure on the drivers, and this was all a big ridiculous situation.
Then there were the accidents.
Look, at one point there, we estimated that there was a truck rollover or an accident of some sort within the Blenner's fleet, averaging every 6 weeks.
How many of those crashes were due to fatigue?
Oh, look, you'd have to lay nearly all of them down to fatigue.
Stephen Gleeson says he raised his concerns internally, but received little support from the company's owner, Les Blenner-Hassett.
Les Blenner used a certain expression to drivers when he thought that they needed to get somewhere in a hurry, didn't he? Can you tell me about that?
Smoke it up. Smoke it up was the saying he used to use. And I can remember one particular time, one young fellow had left Tully late and he'd only made it to Townsville. He rang up and told the lad to smoke it up or your job here will become a short-term thing, sunshine. So that lad, he made it into Melbourne on time.
What would that young driver have had to have done to get to Melbourne?
Round figures, he would have to have driven approximately 2 19-hour days.
It appears the company was actively conspiring to break the law.
An hour south of Townsville is a set of pads, as we call them, where transport inspectors will randomly call trucks in off the road to check roadworthiness, check load restraint, check logbooks, check anything they need to check to make sure the truck's running safe. And at that time, what Blenner's were doing with their single drivers that were coming up, they were pulling up just short of those pads so that the driver wouldn't get inspected. The company would run out in a ute. Another person would jump in the truck and bring it the hour north to Townsville, while the tired driver drove past the pads in the ute and just got around the pads in the ute and met it in Townsville and then continued on to Tully from there. So that was just a blatant way of working their way around breaching the laws.
Les Blenner-Hassett denies this and says neither he nor the company pressured drivers to break the law. But what occurred outside of Tully in 2012 raises serious doubts about those denials. This vehicle inspection site is about 15 minutes from Tully. It's on the only route out of town heading south, and here there was no avoiding the law. In 2012, authorities conducted a blitz on Blenner's Transport. In truck after truck, they found a litany of logbook failures. Drivers leaving the depot just up the road had backdated their logbooks by up to 6 hours. The evidence from roadside cameras revealed massive discrepancies with logbooks and other records seized from Blenner's Transport.
In one case in particular, there was 7 hours difference between where the camera said he was and where the driver said he was in his logbook. So his logbook had been blatantly falsified.
In April, Stephen Gleeson got a call from Queensland Transport and Main Roads asking what's going on.
I just said straight up I didn't believe the company was anywhere near compliant or had any intention to be compliant, and I made no bones about that.
He says the response from the boss was blunt.
And Les just turned around and said, I don't see anything wrong with my paperwork. I'm the director of the company. I deal with Queensland Transport. You don't talk to Queensland Transport anymore.
Stephen Gleeson ignored that directive and continued to make clandestine contact with authorities. In August 2012, he conducted an 8-hour formal taped interview with transport investigators.
I've been around transport industry for about 20 years.
Days earlier, he'd been sacked, allegedly for poor performance.
Why do you think you were sacked?
I was sacked because I put it in writing that the trucks were breaking the law.
So far, only Blenner's drivers have been prosecuted. Queensland Transport and Main Roads has told Four Corners that 45 have pleaded guilty to more than 150 offences and copped fines totalling more than $65,000. Stephen Gleeson says he's had death threats from drivers who've lost their jobs.
You know, after 20 odd years in trucks, you start to sit back and say, what do I do to make a living? Sandra and the boys were putting up with me still fairly vile in the temper. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything. Later on, I've been able to see doctors and been able to understand that that's what they call stress, anxiety and depression. But the other side of that is, and I'll always take this approach, is that the law was broken and we have to stand by that. Personal problems have to get set aside.
Incredibly, in the midst of the investigation in 2012, Blenner's Transport had its fatigue management accreditation renewed. As the sun rises over North Queensland, Bunny Brown gets set for another day.
Knock, knock.
How you going?
Bunny.
Yeah,
Steve Long. Nice to meet you.
Pleased to meet you, Steve.
You got a couple of old ones on the back there.
After 2 months on the road, Bunny's volunteered to cart some old lorries 1,000 miles to a trucking museum.
They've been up on the cane farm.
How old are they?
1955 model. They're both 1955.
Bunny's a bit of a museum piece himself. He's in his 70s and he's been driving trucks since he was a teenager.
How's the industry changed during your time?
Fair bit. Changed for the worst. Too many regulations, too many restrictions. Over-regulated industry.
Owner-drivers like Bunny are at the bottom of the transport chain, taking work contracted out by the big firms at cheap rates. Many share his view that fatigue management laws have led to rigid rules, paperwork and police harassment. At this truck stop near Brisbane, the drivers vent their anger.
Why should a person who has the interests of society and his own family at heart and be involved in conducting an essential service to society be treated the same as a criminal?
It's over-policing. It's on trivial matters.
These drivers hate being told when they have to rest and when they can drive, and they feel persecuted.
Mick Kelly, they pulled him up, he was half hour over time, half hour away from his depot. Knocked him off $330 odd. So how am I going to get the truck home, leave it there? Started carrying. Hang on, he wrote him out a permit to drive the truck home. Took the I got it there.
But he's still got to pay the fine?
He's still got to pay the fine, but he got a permit to drive the truck home.
Blatant revenue raising.
And I got it there, yeah.
Another night on the road, another truck stop. This time Rockhampton. And similar sound and fury.
We don't need anybody to tell us when we are buggered. We know that ourselves.
Don't they have to have rules, though, that say you've got to take a break?
Yeah, but they think they can judge fatigue by looking in our eyes. Are they some type of genius?
Just trying to make it in for a shower, knock off for the night, but you're half an hour over, $700.
Families in our job have got to go without something the week that fine's got to be paid. You've got bugger all left, which means, people are going to go hungry, bills aren't going to get paid, and you tell me what other industry is persecuted like that.
They've given up all hope of a decent return that would let them work less.
That's actually a copy of a petition that we've currently got going at the moment to adopt the WA fatigue scheme into the eastern states to allow us flexibility to manage our fatigue properly on a daily basis.
The WA regulations, though, allow for 17 hours of work. That seems like a lot. That seems to many people on the surface as too much.
Yeah, but it's up to you to manage it yourself.
Not everyone's going to drive the 17 hours. You're going to drive to the hours that you feel that you're capable of doing.
For truckies, things are about to get even tougher. When the new national heavy vehicle laws take force next week, there will be radically increased fines for driving more than legal hours.
This is 762 pages of the new national law that every transport operator in Australia will be bound to after February 10.
Jerry Brown-Sarr happens to have legal qualifications as well as a trucker's licence. He's been perusing the new laws from his home base at Euroa in country Victoria.
The fines in this book are draconian. A minor breach is $4,000. A substantial breach is $6,000 and a major breach, or a critical breach that they call, is $15,000. I mean, these are just idiotic fines. No one's got the money to pay them. No one could pay him. You'd have to sell your house.
Chain of responsibility laws are meant to make everyone in the transport chain responsible for safety. But so far, no major retailer or manufacturer and no major trucking firm has ever been prosecuted.
Who's at the end of that chain? It's the driver. The driver's always on the end of the chain. He has to be. He's the man who has to run it up and down the road. And he's the one who suffers the fatigue. He's the one who's away from home for a long time. He's the one who gets pressure to be somewhere 3 hours ago. At the end of the day, he's the one that's copping most of the flack.
In the happy times, before a truck driver dozed off and killed him, Albert de Beer and his wife Suzanne danced on the beaches of WA like new lovers.
Well, he was my best friend. I lost my heart the day he died. He was a wonderful husband. He was a wonderful father to our 2 boys. The world's a poorer place without him.
The truck driver whose fatigue caused 2 deaths and so much pain is still behind bars. Suzanne de Beer's view of him is remarkable.
He's part of my life now and I'm part of his life. And in whatever way I can be of assistance to him along the road, I will do that. I knew right from the start there was going to be a point where I wanted to go and see him in prison. Just saying that I understand he didn't get up the day deciding to kill 2 people and that I wanted to extend forgiveness to him and lift any burden that he has. And he was really sorry for what had happened. And that's why I'm saying he's paid a price too.
You have to admire Suzanne de Beer's remarkable compassion, but after long years of tragedy involving the industry, the question remains as to why these stories continue to occur on such a scale. The Abbott government's review into the future of the National Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal is likely to be completed by March. Next week on Four Corners, a special investigation into security measures in the Middle East that are causing growing international condemnation, Israel's treatment of Palestinian boys. Until then, good night.